another relatively straightforward one probably is, can we see anyone else apart from Ty Furlong at tight head?
Carl Sinckler.
Or
Carl Sinckler is going to start. Furlong on the bench.
Bold.
Carl Sinckler is the best player of anybody we've mentioned so far today. In the Super Rugby, Carl Sinckler is the best prop in the world.
You've heard it here first, everyone.
Claim. No. We'll go with Baron.
Carl Sinckler is the best prop in the world.
Yeah.
Hello, and in the week that Brad Barrett bid farewell to Saracens, the Bears could have semi for the quarters of Europe. Fake news, Matt Giteau has not signed a contract for the MLR. Sorry, Matt. Manu could be off the Toulon as he and other key players leave Leicester. Plus, it was Harry Berryman's birthday on Tuesday.
It was. Thank you very much, Johnny.
Let's introduce the team. Firstly, he's had more shoulder surgeries than the Terminator. Good evening, Johnny Sheldrake.
Good evening. It's very true.
And secondly, he once went for a tackle and left his knee in another postcode. Hello, Harry Berryman, the birthday boy.
Hi, Johnny.
And finally, he's still waiting for his knee surgery, I believe. Good evening, Joe Trickey.
Evening. Got a phone call on Friday saying that it's going to be mid-August, so it's on the cards. We've actually got a date sorted.
Brilliant. That's over a year and a half when the planet, isn't it?
3 years ago, I actually did it.
There you go.
Ridiculous.
And I'm Johnny Hayes, and welcome to the Ruck 'Em All podcast. On tonight's show, we will review round 4 of Super Rugby Aotearoa as Whanganui restores the Leicester name. And it's the perfect storm for the Hurricanes. Over in Australia, the rampant Reds edge out a young Tars, and the Brumbies bulldoze the Rebels. We will also run through our team and individual players of the week and conclude with previewing next week's games across the 2 Super Rugby competitions, as it's the Blues versus the Crusaders in the big game. Hurricanes take on the Highlanders. It's the Rebels versus the Reds and the Waratahs versus the Force. And we're going to finally wrap up with a new feature looking at 15s, which I'll bring on to later on. But I want to start with something off the main rugby content, and that is the big news, transfer news of the week, which is Beauden Barrett has signed a £780,000 a year deal at Sundori Sungoliath in the Japanese top league, who had Matt Giteau previously. Beauden was always going to be on sabbatical during the World Cup cycle, but what's your thoughts on his move to Japan?
I know I've expressed this view to the three of you off microphone, but but like all of this hype about Beauden Barrett signing for the Blues, Beauden Barrett's going to play for the Blues. He's going to be a star, and the Blues will in some way benefit from having the All Black 10 playing for them. He was on his honeymoon for the first half of this season. He's going to go to Japan for all of next season. Maybe he'll play the whole season after that. And then it'll be the World Cup. And he won't play at all because of the All Blacks rest protocol. He probably won't play maybe 2 full seasons over the course of 4 years contracted to the Blues. Obviously, he's first and foremost an All Blacks player at this point, not a Blues player. But it's still really disappointing.
It is very, very interesting, isn't it? He's obviously signed this deal, and reportedly he's on a lot of money at the Blues. I totally understand. Like, he's 28 now, I believe. Like, he's gonna, for the next World Cup circle, he might need a break. But the Japanese league is still getting a lot better, and he's taking the cash. And his wife is having a baby soon, so there's all that. But in my opinion, I'm just a bit disappointed he's going to Japan. I think if he was going to leave the Blues and go off for a year, I'd have loved him to have signed for an American team such as United New York. That would have been great for the MLR. He'd have been like, they've had players, but they've relied on like older style players that have sort of going there for a payday, like Ben Foden, Bastero's gone there, he's now come back. Drew Mitchell's over there now at the moment with Rugby United New York. Adam Ashley Cooper's going to be there at the Austin team, which I can't pronounce, I'm not going to even say it. He could have had the impact of like David Beckham going to play for LA Galaxy when the MLS was kicking off. It's a bit of a strange, it's frustrating. I think I'm sort of on the same line with you, Harry, but it's sort of different thing. Of I'm frustrated he's going to Japan because there's a missed opportunity for him to have gone to America for a year, especially if he wants a sabbatical like playing rugby. The Japanese top league's getting a lot better. The standard of the American league is a lot lower than the Japanese league. He could easily have a great ride there, but also bringing the massive media storm with him.
The thing is, part of the value for Beckham was that it opened him up to his sort of individual sponsorship and making money that way outside of his playing contract, which he, well, like his LA Galaxy salary was competitive, but nothing compared to all the money made from Paco Rabanne and all the various whiskies and things that he's got money off the side of being this fashion icon. I don't think rugby has that capacity, even if Beauden Barrett became David Beckham, but for rugby, even if that did happen, I don't think he would earn anywhere near as much as this contract in Japan has got him. So financially, I think he's probably made the right decision. In terms of rugby as a whole, it would have been quite cool for him to go to America. But they've already got enough financial problems. I think paying him effectively the salary of a whole team would have been a bit of a mistake. But you can see the arguments.
I think that whole sabbatical thing for those Kiwi players in Japan is quite well established now, isn't it? The likes of Retallick and McCaw do one as well, a sabbatical year in Japan.
Yeah, he just took a year off, I think.
Yeah, they've had a few up there, and obviously Dan Carter's been there for a little while. But also, an important thing, especially for the All Blacks in granting it to him, is that yes, a sabbatical is kind of an opportunity for him to rest, but he still needs to be playing at a decent enough level to maintain his skills. And Japan is becoming that now. There's some genuinely very good players heading there now, a few South Africans. So it is getting better. So it is not just a complete drop. It's not a complete rest year. He's still going to keep his skills honed so that when he comes back, he's going to be that player that they're paying for.
Also, it's probably an opportunity for him to get paid a lot and see another part of the world. I mean, it's nice for these players to go off to sabbatical. I can go play in the south of France in the sun for a year, or I can go play in Japan. And they all love it by the sounds of it. And it's probably just a good experience, especially with a young family. He's not going to be able to do this in, I don't know, 6 years' time when his kids off to school or something.
Yeah, there's very clearly a nice expat community, sort of English-speaking expat rugby community in Japan, which is quite well established now. That's probably quite easy to just slot into, and there's already a network there. And the club that he's going to, obviously, you said they had Giteau before.
Yeah, they had. It was like 10. Yeah.
They'll be used to working around the fact that they've got this superstar. I'm sure he'll be absolutely fine. It's just disappointing as a Blues fan.
Yeah, they're one of the strongest teams in that top league, the Suntory team. It's just an interesting point I wanted to pick up. Really, as we appreciate rugby, your career is not particularly long, 12 years maybe. You want to make as much money as you can. Obviously, starting a family. So yeah, I just found it quite funny how Geordie's had to field all the media of him returning, but also Beauden apparently went down to Queenstown for the week and played golf. So it's quite interesting with that. But let's get into the rugby then. And let's start with Super Rugby Aotearoa, round 4. So once again, Will Jordan has inspired a clinical performance as the Crusaders take a 40-20 victory over the Landers. Jordan again showed he was one of the best players, or is one of the best players in Super Rugby Aotearoa, and 2 tries, and he inspired the break which sent Tom Christie over for the key score in 55 minutes. I did predict on Friday that I thought the Crusaders would win by at least 15 and Jordan to score, but I didn't. But Funganuku didn't score, so I owe you a couple of beers, lads. But I wanted to start with Lester Funganuku, who really deserved a try on his first start in Super Rugby Aotearoa. Joe, you've not seen him play before. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I was impressed. I was slightly disappointed not to see those massive long dreadlocks, to be honest. Of all the weird haircuts we've seen, he's gone the opposite direction and he's tied himself up, which is a bit disappointing. But in terms of his general play, I was really impressed. And it wasn't just his attacking efforts. I thought he was quite good in defence and worked hard. Clearly, he was trying to prove himself, which is what you want to see. And when you've got back three as good as that, you really do need to put in a performance to put your hand up for that team. So yeah, I was impressed with him all the way through the game as well. As you say, Jordan was quality. So is Funganuku. Not many others really stood out as they have in previous weeks. But yeah, very good.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it's something that you could talk about it in a wider sense about Sevu Reece. But having seen the Australian teams come back, and there are obviously this is sort of borderline stereotypical, but every so often you get a particularly league convert wingers or Islander wingers who are known for being powerful and effectively try scorers. Every so often their more wider skills aren't really used by the team or maybe not prioritised. But Funganuku and Reece are as technically good outside of the fact that they can beat three men in a post box. They're as technically good as any other winger in World Rugby, really. And it's really a testament to how well the Crusaders and New Zealand rugby more generally bring players through. Because, Daugunu is really good for the Reds, scores lots of tries, but that's kind of all they use him for. He's a decent kicker. I think he even sometimes kicked goals, but never seen him play at fullback. He's clearly got a wider talent, but they don't really use him in the same way. Whereas Reece, every so often when the Hurricanes are rotating around, every so often you see Reece as that central receiver in a kick reception. So yeah, just a quick note on basically how great the Crusaders are.
Yeah, I think to add to that, just they are very skilled, just all round. I think their skills are really good. I mean, you saw Cody Taylor looked pretty good out wide and stuff, and Jordan just snapping up tries for fun. I mean, it's something like I think he scored 14 tries in 15 Super Rugby appearances, and only 9 of those were starts. So I think they're all round skills, and they've got a nice balance. I think within that team of having your outside wingers who are really skillful and powerful. Good Jack Goodhue, who's just great defensively and a bit of a barrel in midfield. I think it's just really well balanced.
Yeah, it's like the Crusaders again showing that possession wins you the game as well. Like the Highlanders were in the game at half time, or they were ahead, I think, weren't they? I believe, and then the Crusaders just sort of took in the second half, had all the possession, starred them all the possession. They attacked from deeper from when they have done in the previous 2 games. I like the 2-man pod forward system they're using, which seemed to be a little bit different from the other Super Rugby teams, that they're going with a 2-man forward pod, which gives them an option to just crash up, tip it on, or pull the ball out the back. I really like that. They did, as I said, they did struggle in the first 50 minutes to break down the Highlanders, but then they've got that X factor, as you said, of Jordan, Reece and Havili in the end to show up the X factor. But last week it was quite interesting that we had from Harry, we had the James Parson apology tour. I think this week we're in the Highlanders apology hike. We keep bashing the Highlanders on this podcast, but they are generally a very good rugby team. You've got Frizzell, who had a storm of a game. Paddy Parkinson had a brilliant game. Co Tompkinson's looking himself a useful centre. Aaron Smith was brilliant again, who stood up for them. But again, they missed a crucial chance in the second half. Joe, do you want to start talking about that? Because I know in our WhatsApp group you were blown away by that.
Yeah, just to think of it then made me at the time it physically made me angry. It's like playing as an outside back or an outside centre. Those are the few times you get the ball in those positions. If you don't score them or if you mess them up, like you did, was it Nareki? Yeah, just absolutely criminal. And at that stage, would have put them ahead in the game. And the Crusaders went down the other pitch and scored pretty soon after it. But and you can forgive these mistakes if they're really under pressure or if they don't have much time to give the ball. But he sort of pumped didn't give it, held on to it, hesitated, and then got smashed. He had a lot of time to give that ball. He had 2 men outside of him. It was not a difficult pass, and they had an easy run in. And that would have been a really simple try. It would have put them ahead of the game and gave them the momentum to keep going forwards. But in the end, the momentum completely swung the other direction. Crusaders ended up winning by 20 points, which flattered them. But yeah, but those mistakes you cannot afford to make. That was a game-losing mistake.
I thought it was poor, and I'm not even a back. It looked as if he was trying to draw the man, and he didn't need to try and draw the man. The overlap was already there, and there was already loads of space. He just needed to put it through the hands, and yeah, it didn't look good. And I'm sure he was pretty embarrassed after that game. I'm sure there was a few words made to him.
Yeah, nasty talking to her that.
As a coaching point of view, if you're starting your rugby development journey, listen to this. The message from us is to pass the ball. If there's a man outside you with a simple run in, pass the ball.
Not
if you've got a left hand like Harry Behrman, that may not be a good idea.
Or a right hand.
Obviously, this advice doesn't apply if you're twice as big as the guy directly in front of you.
He wasn't in this game.
Anyone else want to say anything on the Highlanders before we move on?
I think this might have been Parkinson's debut season, or if it isn't, he must have had a couple of games last year. He was quite impressed in the second row for Highlanders. Very impressive, sort of in his. I'm not sure he started many games in the original Super Rugby season, but he's been a ever-present fixture of their pack and has been really, really impressive so far. Nice and distinctive with his big hair. So you can always see when he's doing things well, which obviously always helps a player to stand out. But he's standing out for his performances as much as he is for his hair at the moment, which is nice to see from the second row.
Yeah, he's been really impressive in that line out, and just his work rate has been great. I just wanted to quickly just add on Aaron Smith, and we talk about him a fair amount about how good he is. But one of the things that I really kind of look at with nines and how I kind of judge their effectiveness is how they can really affect the tempo of the game, and it's almost like being a conductor in a orchestra. They really dictate the pace of the play. Particular was setting up really short carries and then getting it fizzed away again. And there was a phase where they kind of ascended up the pitch. I think it was possibly for that Nareki mistake where they were pushing really hard for quite a few phases. And that was all down to Aaron Smith. And then there's obviously that try that he kind of created off the back of that line out and then fed it wide. But he's one of the best in the world at doing that. And he really, really makes Highlanders they'd struggle without it. So yeah, another great performance from him.
Yeah, particularly that try, the Punavai try. Smith takes it, having it gone over the back of the line out loose, takes it, runs 30 metres on his own, gives it to somebody else to get tackled, and then the Crusader, pretty much every Crusaders defender is offside. He can take the risk to make that pass on the base of the ruck really, really quickly, because if it doesn't go to a Highlanders player, the Highlanders will get a penalty. And there's your 3 points. And I think they did do that slightly later on in the game, effectively make the break and then just take the risk, throw the brilliant pass, and you either get the try or you get the 3 points for them being offside. So that decision-making, because it could have been very easy for him to clear that ruck, to try and run himself with a broken defence in front of him, but to very accurately one pass straight to a free playmaker who can then just give it straight to Punavai, and Punavai puts it down in the corner. As close to being a solo try as you can without either playing the last pass or even putting the ball down yourself. It was entirely made by Smith. It was fantastic.
I'd say we said this in our WhatsApp chat that the Crusaders, the scoreline potentially flattens the Crusaders somewhat. They were, don't get me wrong, they deserved to win the game. They were efficient, and they show what class really has. So it obviously puts them in very good stead for next week for the Blues. Just on the Highlanders, quickly to sort of summarise, I think they will finish third. I think they've got enough in there to beat the Canes and the Chiefs again. And on that, let's get into the Chiefs and the Hurricanes game. So the Geordie the Jackhammer has takes the Hurricanes to a 25-18 win over the Chiefs. The Canes are finally off the mark with a well-deserved win. My starting point really is who is more important, Geordie for the Canes or Beauden for the Blues?
I'll talk about it a bit later, but Geordie Barrett was really impressive for me. And there's one thing I kind of particularly noticed is that they played very differently with him. So when they had Tia, he was kind of used as another backline player. He'd join in the backline, he'd run a few lines, but they used Geordie a lot as like another first receiver, and they used him a lot he did a few like kick passes and a few kicks in behind, and he's very good with the boot, and it just offers another option which they used a couple of times it didn't really work, a couple of times it worked quite well, and they just have that other dimension that they can go to when he's on the pitch. And then slightly aside from that, him with his boot is a massive benefit. Like the ability to be able to knock over those penalties from whether that was like 50-60 meters, but from being able to play a game plan where if you get a penalty anywhere in their half, they've got the possibility that they can kick it and score for 3 points, means they can play at a completely different level with a kind of different game plan. When they didn't have him in the side and they had Garden Bachop, who wasn't quite so good off the tee, it felt like they were always chasing the try, whereas they can kind of play a bit more conservatively. They can play with those penalties and keep the pressure on the opposition just from scoreable pressure, and that just gives you so many more options. Talia and Caleb Clark and Rico Ioane can all make tries themselves as well. I feel like Hurricanes have fewer of those players, so Geordie's effectiveness is probably more apparent. So that's what I'd say. I think Barrett, they're both Barretts. Geordie, in the way he played yesterday, this morning was one of the major factors in why they won, and the same for Beauden, but probably to a lesser extent.
Yeah, I'd agree. And also having Geordie in the team freed up Garden Bachop to be able to be a bit more aggressive when he was running. It's a bit less of an issue for the team if your fly half's in the bottom of a ruck. If you have a fullback who can just move in to play at fly half, because beforehand it's a somewhat similar problem for the Highlanders in terms of how their backline attack is that if Hunt or previously Garden Bachop got tackled and were then held up for the next phase or two, there's really only a couple of things you can do with that backline. But having the more versatility that Geordie brings you, they can be much more aggressive. And I think Garden Bachop had his best game with a bit of that pressure taken off him.
Yeah, I think what we're interested in as well with Simon Hickey signing this week gives them that strength and depth. We won't have to see TJ having to slot in because Jamie Booth comes off the bench and TJ slots in at 10. He was fine there. It didn't really make a difference, but it has made a difference in previous games. But again, I think with having an actual 10 on the bench will also provide a bit of change for them. Just moving on really is Munga Jensen. So Peter Munga Jensen, who was at 13, did more than Vince Arthur did in his previous 2 games. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. Really young lad, carried the ball hard.
Very direct.
Did very, very, very effective, I thought. It was very nice to see Van Wyk score 2 tries, though they weren't particularly difficult. It was nice for him to get over the whitewash because I think you can tell he's been a bit frustrated in that back line, maybe not having the ball. It was nice to see him with ball in hand. Ardy Sarvir was absolutely fantastic from 8 again. I can see why maybe the All Blacks can see him as an 8 because he's so fast. There's a break in the second half where he's run at least 35 metres. Really, really good. Their line speed and defence very impressive, and it was an all-round much better performance. But again, the Chiefs lose. They're 4-0. They're 0-4. Sorry. They've got a bye next week, which couldn't have come at a better time. What does Gatland need to focus on in that week?
Defence. I mean, that's maybe one aspect, but there was 2 of those tries that the Canes scored were offset pieces first phase. And actually 2 of them, especially the first one, Mackenzie was caught in no man's land. I'm not sure if it's kind of they're not gelling as a team, but you need to trust your inside man to make the tackle. The inside man was there to make the tackle. It wasn't on right at the try line. And I don't know. I just feel that from what I saw, they were soft around the edges, and they weren't kind of coherent as a team in defence.
Yeah. No, I think Mackenzie had what you might call a bad game. A couple of kicks not held, defensively foul, maybe isolated by an effective Hurricanes attack in a couple of occasions, but you've seen him play better, I think, and obviously quite a lot is on his shoulders currently in this Chiefs backline. But when it does go wrong, it really does go wrong, which is a problem at fullback.
Yeah, if I can just comment on that a little bit with where the Chiefs are going wrong. I think you're right. The defence wasn't great. I thought that Hurricanes' attack was quite good. But for me, the real area, and Sam Cane spoke about it in his post-match interview, and he was absolutely gutted. They're just not. They had a lot of opportunities, had a lot of time in Kane's half in their 22, and just did nothing with it. They really just didn't take their opportunities, and that's partly due to Kane. The Canes' defence was quite solid. They worked really hard, and their line speed was very good, and they put the Chiefs under pressure. But a couple of times the Chiefs had quite a few phases in their 22, and then they give away a penalty, or they knock the ball on, or a mistake was made, or they go backwards, and that was just quite poor and quite cynical. And if you want to win matches, you have to take your opportunities. It's as simple as that. So yes, the defence wasn't great, but they were in those. They made those breaks. They got into those positions. They just did nothing with it, and that's partly where we come back to the Canes almost. Yes, they scored their tries, but they were in similar positions at times. They'd win a penalty. Barrett is then able to kick it, and it didn't really seem like they either took that opportunity, or if they even thought about that from the Chiefs' point of view. They're always searching for that try, and they never quite got it.
I suppose there are two tries. One was a penalty try that probably would have been scored and was a penalty try, and the last one was really kind of just a consolation try, and it was a good try. But yeah, I know what you mean.
The last one was good though. After Fido's break, you could have been quite concerned that the Hurricanes would just finish that off, and the Chiefs to effectively win the ball back quite nicely at that breakdown, and then go the length of the pitch to score the try. It's still quite difficult.
Yeah, for me, I think in the next week the Blues have clearly had a week off, because we obviously know about Beauden's gone to play golfing down in the South Island. The Chiefs need to have an inter-club game. That's what they need to do. The Crusaders did it in week 1. They need to go and play rugby, and they need to not make mistakes, cut out the mistakes, and actually find a way for them to play. And they need to mix the team up. And yeah, you've got to think about what's Gatland doing. Like, we talked that he's had this brandish notion that he's the best coach of all time. But should the best coach of all time, you think he should be at the top? Don't get me wrong. Like, it's an interesting thing anyway. For me, just to finish off, is in the second half, they looked dangerous on the break. I thought Triple T, when he came on, was absolutely brilliant, and Alemano really brings something on that wing. He'll start in 2 weeks' time, and I think Triple T will start next time. If I'm going to be a betting man, Brad Webber is another one that didn't particularly have a great game again. But Triple T, he's got pace. He looks exciting. He got them over the gain line. He was changed up their attack. He was picking and going. Same with Alemano. Alemano's first bit of the game, comes in, picks the ball up at the back of the ruck. That's what they need. They needed something a little bit different from that. But again, they do need to think. They need a hard look at themselves. Go back to the drawing board, because the first few games it was reasonably close, I would have said. But today, the Canes won that game well, in all honesty. But we'll come back we'll leave Super Rugby Aotearoa for there, and we'll come back to it at the end for just have a quick preview chat about next week's games. But let's go to Super Rugby AU. As it kicked off on Fridays, the Reds claimed a 32-24 victory over the Waratahs. Tate McDermott, Hunter Pasami, and the Tongan Thor, Tanini Topu, having particularly impactful games. With all the issues going on with Rugby Union Australia, how important was this game to get them back on track?
It was very good and nice to see good, effective, really, team players on both sides and the teams in general playing quite well in parts. Not amazingly, but not badly, which is more than you certainly could have feared for, having seen a few of the Waratahs games earlier in the year, and really seeing how the Reds have been finishing games off, or not, as the case may be. But yeah, reasons to be optimistic, really, in every position. If you were to pick a Wallabies team built out of these two squads, it would be fine. It wouldn't be great, but it would be okay. So hopefully as many of them stay as possible. Obviously they've had their main round of people leaving, with Isaac Rodder and Isaac Lucas leaving at the first instance of this contract and financial issues. But if as many of these guys as possible can stick around, there's reasons to be cheerful.
For me, I was impressed by the Reds, actually. Harry talked them up in the preview pod on Friday, and haven't seen them play for a while. They look really good. I like that James O'Connor was at 10. He's the experienced cog in a very young, exciting Reds team. There's been, you sort of get a tarnish with this thing that O'Connor was a utility back. He started with his first career when he was 21 as a 15, and he's a good 15. He's quick enough to be on the wing, but he's always wanted to play 10. He played 10 at the Rebels. That didn't really work. He's obviously been at London Irish when he came over to England for the first time. Started at 15. We moved him at 10. Didn't work. Moved him back to 15. Went to Sale. Got jacked up. Played in the centre. Wasn't particularly effective. He's come back to Australia. He's lost all the weight again. And he looked really, really interesting. Something that I wanted to pick up on very quickly. There's a few different rule changes with the Super Rugby AU, which Tate McDermott used to absolute perfection in the second half, where they done the 50-20 rule, which means if you kick the ball within your 50-metre mark or between the two 22s, and it bounces, it goes out and into touch, it's your ball, which Tate McDermott used to absolute perfection in that regard. So that was quite interesting as well. Another one as well, which we saw a bit more in the Brumbies game than was the rule on if the ball is kicked into the dead ball area, it is a tap, and it is a dropout from the try line. So that is another interesting one that benefits the team that had the kick anyway. So that was quite interesting to see the different comparisons. But for me on that was that game in particular, there was no fear to play. It was quite nice to watch two Australian young teams who have got very quick players like Jack Maddox, who scored an absolute beautiful try inside line, cut them apart. Some big hits by Hunter Pasami, made some absolutely brutal hits. The Tongan 4 was unlucky not to score a nice little tap and go try. It was pulled back. But it was great to see there's some youth in that Australian sides. While we're sort of seeing in Super Rugby at Aotearoa that we've got a bit more of an attritional, big ball carrying brand. Australia, the carry's a little bit off. They're playing a lot more quicker, but it's quite interesting to see. And the Reds have made a really good start on that.
Yeah, just a brief thing on O'Connor and Tupu. There must be a politics thing or some kind of, because I think Hegarty might be the captain. I don't really understand why O'Connor doesn't kick the whole time. He is better than Campbell and Hegarty. I don't really understand why they don't start the game and really end it with him kicking. But that's a choice that they've made.
Well, it bears fruit when you're the experienced players, such as he kicks 2 late penalties, and that was really the difference. It was a back and forth game. The Tars look like, obviously, letting Curtly Beale go early, I think, is a mistake, and that's going to come back to haunt them because they need someone a bit more experienced. Michael Hooper's taken a lot on his shoulders. But as I say, James O'Connor had a good game, and the Reds deserve to win in that overall.
And then Tupu, nice to see him absolutely mincing scrums.
Yeah,
it's all well and good being a good carrier, but if the Wallabies are going to rely on him for the next 10 years as their 60-minute, 70-minute tight head, he needs to be good at scrums. And obviously, Robbie Abel and Gus Bell aren't South African of really any one of their Mbonambi and Kitsoff, let's say. They're nowhere near that standard. But Tupu has to be winning pretty much every scrum he comes across if the Wallabies are going to have any hope.
Definitely, it definitely looks a little bit brighter, especially maybe not for the next World Cup, but the World Cup afterwards. Australia could be potentially very dangerous. On young players, let's move across to the Brumbies, as the Brumbies took on the Rebels in Canberra. The Brumbies employing their Barbarossa-style maul to blow away the Rebels in the end, but who had a resurgence in the second half, but eventually went down 31-23. Despite some poor second half discipline, the Brumbies looked like they showed their class in the end. They scored 5 tries, 4 of those in the first half. Noah Lolesio, who definitely for me won the Battle of the Tens, is a young 21-year-old fly half for the Brumbies, playing against Matt Tamur on his 100th game. Matt Tamur, formerly of the Brumbies. But yeah, he played exceptionally well. Some very, very strong carries and very good running meters, especially from a fly half. It's very impressive. The Rebels came back well in the second half, but again, I talked on Friday and hoped the Rebels might win, but they didn't utilise what I thought they were going to do, in the sense they needed to get the ball to their exciting back line. They made too many mistakes in the forward pack and they weren't as effective as they could have been.
No, I agree. Nice to see the Brumbies haven't lost any of that organisation and power. Very, very ready to have the backs get involved in them all. I think Lolesio was the guy on Fainga's back as he went over the line for one of those tries. It's always good to see.
Yeah.
And Joe Powell getting a really nice proper scrum half, diving between the legs of the second row. It's always very frustrating when that happens, but it's how you score tries. It's very effective. And yeah, we talked about how Tate McDermott, or I mentioned at least how Tate McDermott might be one of the few genuinely world class would get into any team in the world players playing in this Australian competition. But Fola Fainga is always just fantastic. There are a lot of reasons to be optimistic if rugby was only what happened inside the lines. Unfortunately, it's not, but he's good fun.
Yeah, I didn't manage to catch the whole game and watch the highlights, but it was still quite clear. You say they scored quite a few tries, and the couple of things that we spoke about before when we were previewing it is that Rugby scored quite a lot of tries and things like their line-outs are their strength. And one of the things that was clear, certainly from the highlights, is that their line-out looks strong, and as you say, they're more worked well. So that's part of that, I think. But yeah, good to see them scoring tries and winning games again. They seem like they're a team in form.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, as I say, we're sort of getting two contrasting styles, which is quite nice. So we're not always. I mean, I watched 4 games of rugby this week, and I'm not moaning about that. I think it's great. I'm buzzing. I can watch 4 games of rugby, but it's quite nice that each game was different. Is in its sense, the New Zealanders offer you that sort of X factor, attritional style, where the Australians are a little bit more quick, tight pace. There's obviously a bit more mistakes in there. I think handling wasn't great from all 4 teams in that. But as I say, it's something that we maybe talked about before, that Super Rugby sort of brandish with this idea that it's no defence, all offload. But actually, we've got 2 competitions here that, though they've got the teams from Super Rugby, the actual competition style, as it were, was a lot higher. Like if you look at the tries, the Australian team scored more tries than the New Zealanders this week, which sort of again shows you've got different styles maybe. As I say, it's not because the New Zealanders aren't attacking well. I think it's more down to the fact that the Australians haven't focused as much on defence, and they aren't as dominant. If you watch the dominant hits in there, they're more behind to get over the gain line, as it were. So it's certainly something to watch and look out for. I'll just quickly run through our team of the week, which we're going to chat about later. Pick out some, and we'll pick out our players of the week as well to briefly discuss. So, starting at loosehead, we've got James Slipper, the Brumbies loosehead Australian stalwart. I thought he had a fantastic game for the Brumbies, carried really well, got over the gain line, and again, is a key cog in that effective line out, is a key lifter. As we've mentioned before, Folau Fainga, can't stop scoring at the moment. Got another try despite getting a yellow card. He came back off the came back from his yellow card, played exceptionally well. Tanley Tupu, the Tongan Thors at 3. Again, brilliant, some really good dominant carries, and it's great to see that he's got his scrum technique really honed in now. We were a bit worried for a few seasons. He's a very good ball carrier around the park, but again, he lacked a little bit of effort in the scrum. Lock, Paddy Parkinson's in there. Again, he's having a really good breakout year in that Highlanders team, one of the really shining lights in that line out. And just on second rows in general, just on the behalf of all of us, I hope that our Coy, the chief second row, gets well soon. And it was interesting, poor old James Scrampton getting a red card. I think that was the most dubious red card for a while. Anyway, unlucky James.
Very unlucky yellow cards, I think.
You took it well, mate. Well done. You held your head up high, so good job, lad. Number 6, the machine that is Shannon Frizzell. We talked about him sort of going under the radar because he's in the Highlanders team, as opposed to if he was in the Crusaders, everyone would be like, all the Blues, for example, would be talking about Hoskins Tutu, but his stats are, again, really, really top and up there. Number 7 is the Crusaders returning 7, Tom Christie, scored 2 tries. Admittedly, he didn't have to do a lot for the first one, which was just a bosh over, but the second one he worked a bit harder for. He's really good over the ball. He was, again, he had a great game, first game back, so well done to him. 8 is Harry Wilson, the Reds 8, had a good, strong game again, got a try. Honourable mention for Soliolo, the Chiefs 8. I thought he was probably the best player for the Chiefs throughout the game. I don't particularly know why they took him off, to be honest. He had some ridiculous carries, but again, it sort of shows that the Chiefs, I've only got one option, and that's to sort of pass directly to him. Number 9, honourable mention to Aaron Smith, but Tate McDermott had scored a try and looked brilliant. I've definitely pronounced the Chiefs 8 wrong, but we'll get
cooler.
There you go. Apologies. Number 10, as I talked about him before, is Noah Lolosio. Great game from him. Number 11, despite other wingers scoring tries, honourable mention to Muirhead at the Brumbies, but Lester Funganuku was the X factor for the Crusaders. He was desperately unlucky not to score, but he is certainly one to watch. 12, though he was playing at 13, we've moved him into 12 for this one, is Theo Tompkinson. Again, he's starting to become sort of the unsung hero of Super Rugby Aotearoa. Another great performance again, doing the basics really well, tackling well, and shoring up that Highlanders defensive line. Number 13 we talked about is Hunter Pisani, really, really exciting young outside centre for the Reds. Definitely watch him. An absolutely demolishing hit on one of the Waratahs players earlier on. Again, I think it was the winger, but I can't remember from off the top of the head. But he put him into next week. 14, again, we talk about him enough, is Will Jordan. Enough said. And then 15, the returning Geordie Barrett. So we've got 3 Brumbies, 3 Reds, 4 Crusaders, 3 Highlanders, and a Hurricane in there. Johnny, you haven't spoken for a while. Who's your player of the week?
My player of the week isn't in your team.
Oh!
My player of the week is Rich Mo'unga.
Oh.
Okay.
Didn't see any of the Australian games, but I thought Rich Mo'unga had one of the most complete performances I've seen of any 10 in Super Rugby Aotearoa so far. I thought he was really good, and he put in a massive hit at that crucial time. Folded him like a deck chair. It was great. But that's who my player of the week would be. I thought he was really impressive, and he controlled that game well, and he used his outside backs when he needed to. He put Good Hugh into some great positions, and his kicking game out the back really, I think, tested the opposition. Bit controversial, but I thought Richard Mo'unga was
slightly
great.
Controversial. He's not my 10. Anyway,
he is a really, really good player. There's no
brilliant though. Joe, is your player of the week in the team of the week?
He is, yeah.
Hey!
You got that one right. I've already mentioned him, but Geordie Barrett. I don't really need to go into too much detail. Already spoken about how effective I thought he was for the Hurricanes. That offering that second first receiver, well as well as Lamape as well. When they've got the 3 of them, whoever's playing at 10, Lamape and Geordie Barrett, they've got a lot of options. And then that boot can win you games. That massive kick he had at the end of the first half. So yeah, he's really, really important for the Hurricanes, and that's one of the reasons why they won.
And Harry, does your player make it in the team of the week? Or you?
Well, I did have Hoskins Satutu down, but I didn't actually play this week. I'm sure whatever he did, it was brilliant. And he's really got under the skin of almost every English rugby commentator this week by daring to mention that his mum's English. Anyway, my actual player of the week, I've talked him up already, Folau Fainga. Big fan of a hooker who does his job perfectly and then some. It's obviously become quite common in rugby more generally that hookers are expected to have a bit more than just set piece skills, but it's one of the best.
And finally, my player of the week is unsurprisingly in the team of the week. And ironically, he is the fly half of the team of the week. And that is Noah Lolosio. He's got a very bright future, as I said previously. As I said, he outplayed Tamua, ran the ball to the line. So he ran 71 metres in total, 8 carries, 1 try assist. He's very, very bright Australian 10. But again, the classic media will be get him straight in. Still needs a bit of time, but he's definitely a promising start. Yeah, go on, Harry.
Well, I think Will Harrison, who started at 10 for the Tars this week, is similarly quite highly rated. So, like having 2 good young fly halves for Australia, starting every single week for their Super Rugby teams, again, provided that they both stay. I should just have that as like a banner flashing behind me. But provided that they both stay, that's looking like quite a good competition for them for the next few years.
And I think Australia haven't really had consistent 10s. The same person at 10. They dabbled with Quade Cooper for a bit. They dabbled with O'Connor for a bit. They've had Foley, but they haven't really kind of stuck to a 10 they can build a team around for a while.
And it's so valuable having them starting every week at 10. Like they're not messing around putting them at fullback like some of the young South Africans, mainly Valemsi and Bosch. They're playing fly half every single week, making those decisions. Similar forwards they'll be playing with for the Wallabies. Probably not the same 9, although I guess Powell and McDermott's probably the incumbent at the moment, isn't he? Or him and Genia. But you've got to be playing every week if you're going to be a fly half long term internationally. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think we'll leave it there for this week on that. What I want to do though is we aren't just a podcast which is solely focused on Super Rugby. We are a whole holistic rugby podcast. So what I want to do this week is to introduce our new feature, which is the 15s feature. So every week we're going to predict. We're not going to do a whole 15. We're going to spend a few weeks over doing each one. We're going to start with obviously the Lions tours next year to South Africa, and the first one we're going to look at is predicting our starting team for the first test. Not a squad, the starting team. We're going to start this week with the front row. So Lou said, anyone want to pose anyone apart from Mako, or should we just move on to hooker?
You've sprung this on us.
I know.
Yeah, you've sprung this on us, and
because I wanted just to throw this in to see what you could, if you can.
What's our options that Lou said currently?
You have got Mako and Mako. No, Mako. You've obviously got Cian Healy's probably kicking around in Ireland. You've got the Ferguson, the young Scotland props, not bad.
Rhys Carey.
Rhys Carey, he's now obviously not going. He's not at Saracens next year. He's back in Wales.
Yeah. And then Genja Marler.
Wyn Jones, Genja Marler, probably.
Oh, I would Genge potentially. He might have it. He's at that age where he might suddenly just kick on, and he's been understudy for a bit. He might suddenly want to kick on. Mako, kind of the rest of the year might not work out. But I think it'll be Mako. But
yeah.
Genge will be the one who'll challenge it, I would say.
Mako? Tricky, anyone else? Or should we just go Mako and park it and move on?
This isn't really my area of expertise. I'm not even sure which players are loose and which are tight. So
Mako it is. Mako it is, but with Ellis Genge on the bench, ooh, maybe. Hooker, you've got Jamie George, Ken Owens will probably be still around. Sean Cronin still at a good age. Fraser Brown from Scotland might sneak in. You've got a couple of Welsh young lads as well coming through. Anyone else?
Cowan Dickey.
Oh yeah, Cowan Dickey's a good shout.
Cowan Dickey will be the third hooker to run the midweek team, because he's both a good tourist and as good as anyone. Suspect George will. Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Difficult. All of these will be hard.
He's not going to be. He's going to be playing for Saracens next year in the Championship. A few games. He'll probably turn out for Ealing away and at home. He said on another podcast he wants to do Cornish Pirates away, so that'd be a good boozy trip.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not my area of expertise, but I've always been a big fan of Jamie George. Not just for he's obviously very solid and he's a very good hooker in his own right, the things that you should do well in the line out in the scrum, but he offers you quite a lot with ball in hand as well. He's a good carry of the ball. He's shown us that he can kick grubbers every now and again as well. So I think he's been quite consistently a very good performer at international rugby for a few years now. So he's definitely on the plane. Whether he starts is a different prospect. But when you've got players like Rory Best and that stepping down, Ireland don't have a massive front run at the moment. I reckon Jamie George is probably the key one.
Yeah, I was just trying to think through who the Wales and Welsh, Scottish and Irish options are at hooker, and they're not really at the same standard as George and Cowan Dickey are, unfortunately.
No, but I think the question will be actually is, will this be a time when they move on from George and go to Cowan Dickey? Because I mean, George is going to be turning 30 in October.
That's still quite young.
Still quite young, but maybe there's always been questions the past 2 years. Should he be starting in front of George? Or should Cowan Dickey be starting in front of George? I mean, I think George should be starting, but I think that could have a factor in this year where unless you see George starting every England match, no one's going to see him because he's playing in the Championship.
It is particularly difficult, really, doing this entire team because we've got a whole year of international rugby between now and then, and who knows what that year of international rugby is going to look like. Well, yeah, exactly. It's very possible that we play half the number of fixtures. So this team does end up being picked on effectively the information that we have now. So it would be very possible for them to go with a really conservative selection and just pick the guys that we know are going to be good.
Yeah.
I personally think unless Cowan Dickey has a exceptional Six Nations and plays and starts every game, and he has, or vice versa, that has an outstanding European competition and extra drawn in a group with a Clermont or a team that's got a vast amount of internationals in it, like a Leinster, for example, for him to compete against. I could see him getting on the plane 100%. I think he's going to be in that sort of the third choice bracket, but for me, Jamie George all the way. And then finally, another relatively straightforward one probably is, can we see anyone else apart from Ty Furlong at tight head?
Carl Sinckler. Carl Sinckler is going to start. Furlong on the bench.
Bold.
Carl Sinckler is the best player of anybody we've mentioned so far today. In the Super Rugby, Carl Sinckler is the best prop in the world.
You've heard it here first, everyone.
Claim. No. We'll go with Baron.
Carl Sinckler is the best prop in the world.
Yeah.
He's always been quality with the ball in hand, and he's shored up the other sides of his game recently. So if he can just keep that going, then yeah, you're right. He's a very, very good player.
Do you know what? As well, I'm also thinking from outside the box. I'm also going to be. I think let's go for Sinckler actually, because everyone else. There was another podcast that did this, and they said Furlong without a shadow of a doubt. No, let's go against the grain. Let's forge our own path.
Let's pick an all-English front row.
Not a lot in South Africa. It's the England.
To be fair.
It's England plus Stuart Hogg at fullback. We've done it. Let's move on, right?
Right. We also changed the colour of the Lions shirt to white. Whilst we're at.
There we go. We'll have a reverse kit, and then Stuart Hogg will have a blue one at the back.
And then the English can be hated even more.
Absolutely brilliant.
I do think this would be an interesting exercise to go, that team that started the World Cup final, how would you improve it with anybody else? Because
it's quite hard to.
It's a really good team.
Yeah.
It was.
Really, really, really good team.
Right, on that note then, so we've got in our front row, do you agree? We've got Mako Vinopola at loosehead, Jamie George at hooker, and tight head is Harry Berryman's called him the world's best prop. Like, or comment below on the video or the Instagram post when this video probably gets used as the thumbnail. Whatever you think that is. So that's our front row of the grid. Well, lovely stuff. We'll do the second row next week, lads. So you've got Tricky. You've got a whole week to research what a second row does, and it's going to be. There's a lot of them. Lovely stuff. Right, this brings us nicely to the end of episode 6 of the Ruck and All podcast. We're an Acast podcast on YouTube as well. So if you want to sit down with a beer on a Sunday evening or a Monday, whenever you're accessing this, and watch us, then great. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Hit the subscribe button. Share us with your mates. As I said, we're just 4 blokes that enjoy talking about rugby. And we'll see you on Friday to preview round 5 of Super Rugby Aotearoa, as it's the crunch game. It's Le Crunch, as they say in France. It's the Blues versus the Crusaders and the Hurricanes versus the Highlanders. And then we've got round 2 of Super Rugby AU, as the Rebelicious Rebels take on the Reds and the Waratahs take on the returning force. We'll see you on Friday. Have a great week.
Au revoir, Johnny.
Cheers.